I was in there putting my kids to sleep and to bed, and the neighbors here had seen him go by, and I heard the commotion. I come out, and he was already down there. He was beelining right, just focused right to this tree line. And then the first responder came down, and then there was a series of shots fired, like maybe 11 or 12, real fast, and a pause. And then another cop car went down that way, and there was another series of shots fired. And then I started asking questions. What does this guy look like? You guys seen him? I guess neighbors here described my friend Justin to a T. And I was just like, oh God. And if he's down there, then he's not up at his place. So I went up, checked his place. If he answered the door, it wasn't him, right? And I'd be happy. But it turned out to be the opposite.
It was just that blank, dead stare in his eyes. Like, I didn't get a good look right at his face head on, but I saw him from the side, and he was staring straight ahead, walking straight ahead.
Where were you standing?
We were inside. Her husband and my son were playing in the windows. Her husband said, "Did you just see that guy walking up the road with an army suit on and all that?" I don't even think he mentioned the guns at first.
He said, "Look at that stupid fucker." And I'm sorry to say it, but those are the words he said. Look at that stupid fucker walking up the road.
We thought it was just some young punk just trying to scare people, and just thought he was being funny.
But you didn't recognize him as Justin?
Nope.
I didn't recognize him at first. I haven't seen the guy. I have met him briefly a couple of times, but that was 4 or 5 years ago. He was just a baby then. He was a teenager, little baby-faced teenager. So I didn't recognize him immediately until my husband come home and started asking about the description of the guy, and then the neighbor here, Carrie, he said, "Well, that's Justin. You just described Justin." So he took off up to Justin's house and see if he could at least see if Justin was home or if he was gone, and then he saw that the house was empty and all that.
The gun cabinet was empty.
It wasn't until he said that the gun cabinet up there was empty, then we were like, it's him.
So when the cop arrived, it was what you said, about 10 minutes later?
Probably about...
I had just hung up the phone when the cop come in here, and my phone call was only about 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
And did he have the lights going? And
I don't recall. I don't remember him having lights on.
He had them on.
He was speeding through here, and he saw us pointing that way. And as soon as he saw us pointing, he stopped, backed up real fast, and he said, do you know where he went? And we said, that's him walking into the woods right now. So he sped up, turned the lights on and all that. So I don't think he had the lights on coming in here.
Okay.
But he did turn them on after, and I yelled out to him before he went up there. I said, he's heavily armed, and that bullet clip is full of bullets and ammo. So we said, be careful, and that was the last we heard of him. So, and then we heard later on, it's not confirmed yet, but we heard later on that he was one of the first ones to be shot down. So it's been really heartbreaking ever since, and all of us have his face in our minds.
Yeah.
And it'll be a while before we get over. After he went to the end of the park, he was already at the end of the park alone when we saw the first cop car fly up Mountain Road going up Lonsdale.
Yep.
And then we could hear that other ones were going up in the subdivision back here.
Over in
So, like I said, it was only about 1.5 to 2 minutes that he was alone dealing with the situation. But in a situation like that, 1.5 minutes could mean life or death. And unfortunately, it was death for him. So, and it's hard to gauge the whole time frames. Everybody keeps asking me about times. When did you call? How long before you heard the shots?
And again,
at the same time, it's almost like it was in fast forward, but at the same time in slow motion. So it's really hard to gauge any time frames. But from what I remember, it was about 1.5 to 2 minutes before any backup showed up for this officer. So he heard the sirens in the background. He knew backup was on the way, but still,
by himself.
There was nobody in there at the time when he went back there. Specifically at that time, there was nobody yet in the area because we could hear the sirens coming from
that way,
the distance over there. And it was still a good I'd say a minute and a half to 2 minutes.
Yeah, because one went up
Which
Marsh
in a
and then come back
situation
down.
like this, a minute and a half doesn't sound like long for him to go without backup. But I'm sure for that officer, a minute and a half was an eternity. So the fact that I was the first one to call it in, and then on top of that, I was one of the last people to talk to this police officer. And then my husband works in Riverview. He had just called 10 minutes before this all happened, saying he was on his way home. He travels that exact route to get home from work. So I didn't care where those bullets were flying. I stood over on Marsh right in the wide open waiting to see my husband's face come over the trees. So, and then again, my autistic daughter was outside with me. She heard the shots ringing off. We initially heard one burst of, it was several different guns you could hear. At first we heard what we are assuming was a 9mm that an officer normally carries. And then the sound changed to this rapid fire, and it was just bang, 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 one after another. Everything went quiet for about 4 or 5 minutes, maybe. I'm assuming.
Debbie, your mom wants you. Your mom wants you.
And then we ended up hearing more gunfire, and I think there was 3 separate bursts of gunfire, and everybody I've spoken to said the same thing. It was 3 separate gunfires.
I don't know. I ran into the house with the kids.
Yeah.
I took all the kids. My landlord's daughter. I took her into the house. I took her daughter into the house. I took her son into the house. And I locked the door immediately.
And I told everybody, you're crazy if you think I'm going in the house with my husband out there running head on into this situation. He didn't know. He had called me 10 minutes before I called the RCMP. So. People are pretty stressed out today, as you can tell. It's because she actually, the lady that just yelled, she was standing at the end of the driveway talking to our neighbor when he walked by her. So, and she had her baby grandson with her. So, people are really
when he walked by
when he went
out on his mission.
Yeah, and then they come into the house over at her house where we were sitting because they had seen that we were also looking in the windows and stuff, and then she come in the house, our neighbor, and she said, "Did you see that? Those are real bullets. That's real guns."
She was sitting there with her phone trying to zoom in to try to take pictures there, and she couldn't do it. She
and
ran
while
right to
she
me.
was taking pictures, I said, "Did anybody call the cops?" And as soon as she said no, I picked up the phone and dialed, and then she said, well, fuck it, I'm not gonna try and take a picture anymore. I'm calling 911. Okay. She went behind the steps to call 911. Like I said, adrenaline rush, you not thinking straight. I stood at the end of her driveway and called the cops. He could hear me. He was at the trees right there when I called. He could have heard me on the phone with the cops.
But that's what he wanted.
I was standing right there behind that car at 48, and he was at those trees right there. He knew I was on the phone with the cops. My voice carries in the neighborhood. I just got that kind of voice. So he could have turned around at any moment and shot me because I was calling the cops. But he didn't. And he didn't shoot the ladies who were standing there with the child. He didn't shoot anybody else that he ran into on the street.
So it sounds like he was setting a trap.
He knew what he wanted.
He knew.
He wanted
was
us
after
to do.
the police.
He knew what he wanted, and that's what he wanted us to do.
he was just walking straight like anybody would walk, but it was just something about the walk. It was just too straight. I mean, we're in a trailer park with the roads that have never been fixed in about 50 years. So people don't walk in a straight line on this road. And he was just staring dead ahead and walking straight ahead.
Blank face.
Yeah, and it was that blank, deadly stare on his face. Like there was no emotions. Everybody keeps saying, what do you feel were what did he look like? What do you think was going through his head and all that? And I said, that's the thing. There was no expression on his face. It was the lack of expression that tipped me off that this was something serious. And even then, I didn't gauge how serious it was until I heard the first shots going off. And even then, we kind of thought, well, it could be somebody blowing off fireworks, but then we heard the rapid fire and we were like, okay, well, obviously it's not fireworks anymore.
My wife called me up. I was at GMC, McDonald Pontiac. I was getting the truck fixed and all that, and on my way home, she called me up and said there was a guy walking down Pioneer Street with a gun. And I told her that it had to be a pellet gun or something. She said, no, it's a real gun. And we took Edinburgh Drive, Barry Mills Highway, and then we come down Ryan Road and then Hildegard. And when I got to Hildegard, we come around the corner by the MB Power sub, and there was a cop that got shot right there in the car in front of us. He got shot 3 times. He got shot the first time, driver's window, second time the passenger's window went out. Then it was a back window that went out. And
What did you see?
what did I see? I see him get shot, and then I seen the other cop yell at me to get out of there, get out of there. He was in a RCMP Blazer. There was 2 cops in that Blazer. He jumped out. He jumped into the cop car and took the cop car out of there. Then that's when we took off out of there too.
The cop car where the guy was
The guy got shot. The cop grabbed the guy, moved him over, jumped in the car and took off.
He moved the shot guy over
Yeah.
to the passenger side?
Well, I don't know if he knew he was dead or hurt or what, but he moved him over and jumped in the car and took off with the car. And the other guy took off with the Jeep.
Okay.
And they bring the car up and they parked it on the side of the road on Ryan Road. But the RCMP that I seen, that was on Hildegard. That's the one we seen shoot. There was 3 shots shot at him. When we got there, that's all I heard was 1 gunshot, and then I seen the cop's head go like that in the car.
After the windows being
And then there was there was 2 more shots, and then everything started there. The guy started yelling, the other cop started yelling, and he moved. I didn't know if it was a body or a bag that he was moving over, but he moved him over in the passenger seat, and he jumped in the car and he took off. And that's when I made a complete donut in the middle of the road, and I took off to her. That's where we were right there.
When we turned around,
And when the cop got shot, the curb is the one that stopped the car.
when we turned around, we were around the turn up there. Is when we span around.
Yeah.
That's how we noticed that guy over by the swing set there.
The second shot there, he come right out of that, right beside there. He had a perfect shot right to here. He was standing right beside that swing there when I seen the second shot, and the cop car was right there where that no parking sign is. The glass is still there on the road. He shot that way, and we spun around and took off.
He just came down the park just to get someone to call the cops on him.
Yeah.
And then he just opened fire.
'Cause,
Because like I said, if he was out after civilians, he would have shot my buddy Virginia right there.
I know, it was just like, it was a scary experience. Like,
Oh yeah.
I lived in Montreal and I lived in all kinds of places and all that, and I've never seen that happen to my face like that. He wasn't out to hurt anybody, he was out to hurt the cops, because he walked right down the road and he was armed and all that, and there's no way. He could have shot everybody in the park here. And he didn't even open fire, didn't look at nobody, didn't talk to nobody, just walked straight down. Just like he was a guy in an army out on a mission, like he was in a combat going to his mission and that, and there's no way, like, he was just walking there.